to call our workshop to order. I understand that the oaths of office have been administered to our new members, our new regular members, and our two new alternates. And welcome everyone. May we have roll call, please?
David Dahl.
Here.
Margot Moore.
Here.
Nicholas Andrews.
Here.
Debbie Cole.
Here.
Justin Henderson.
Here.
Dean Haddock.
Here.
Matthew Filer.
Here.
Thank you.
I would say we have a quorum. With that, may I sort of hand it over to staff to tell us the new business. Thank you.
That's as far as it goes, so I'll just yell into the microphone. Well, welcome to our new members. Very excited to have you. I know we have talked about the Land Development Code on multiple occasions. Staff really appreciates everyone's participation in all the workshops and discussions and Q&A that we've had. We are in the 11th hour. We are ready to wrap this thing up. So we didn't want to just throw it at you guys to vote on. We wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to have a discussion and address any final concerns you have, answer any questions you have, address any issues that may still be out there. Staff did have a workshop with council back in November. Is that right? Back in November, where we went over some those last hanging out there issues. That table associated with that discussion is in your packet, so it's the one that's kind of yellow and blue, I think. So if yellow and green, I apologize. And I'm not colorblind. So the documents in your packets prior to the
I don't
LDC.
think everybody has this.
Yeah, we don't have hard copies of it.
You don't have hard copies of that?
And
I think Monica printed those out. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. It's on the agenda online that you received.
Absolutely.
So before the LDC, before you get to that 316-page document, you'll see a project timeline with all the workshops laid out for you. And then the table that you guys are handing out. And then the last thing is really more of a summary table that goes article by article. And Kimberly Horn's going to go into some detail on just really kind of the high level stuff and then touch on some details in each article of what the big topics and what the big focus for updates were. But every section of this LDC has been touched in one way or another, even if we moved some things around, changed some language, updated a date reference or a agency reference. So some of it didn't change, but we had touched at least one thing in every single article. Some things, for example, like the flood hazard ordinance, that was recently updated. So I think we did make a lot of changes to that. But with that, so I'm gonna turn it over to Kimberly Horn, who's gonna just provide a summary, and then we'll dive right into Q&A, issues, concerns, that sort of thing. So workshop format, we want to keep it a little bit more informal than we would for a regular meeting.
How are y'all?
Oh, I don't know if I need this. Don't need to yell at me.
Okay. Blair Knight and Kimberly Horn, y'all pretty much know me, most of you. Mark Shelton here with Kimberly Horn as well. You get two things in front of you. The big, huge, thick one is the Land Development Code, and then the other one is the comp plan. I thought y'all would want a hard copy of that.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
impressed.
Yeah, how impressed. If you see any typos, please let me know. There shouldn't be any, but you never know. Lots of documents. So we're pretty happy to be here. It's been a long journey. So just brief overview. Let me turn this on.
It is connected.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
Oh, there we go.
There we
Get
go.
the right trajectory.
There you go. You gotta have the right.
Yeah, just gotta wiggle it.
Okay, got it. Okay, so just so you know, this timeline we've kind of kept throughout the whole project. We are in the last stage, as you can see, the very end, where we're basically LDC hearings and final copies. It's been a long journey, like I said, since 2022. I don't want to say that out loud, but it has, I guess it has been that long.
Yes, it has.
These kinds of things take some time. Oh, plans,
If you guys need me to, I
We
can.
might.
Next slide, please.
Yeah.
And this is kind of like the almost kind of workshop, ordinance, timeline. We wanted to give you kind of a more detailed of like the actual hearings. And if you can see, we did the final adoption December for the comp plan. And then we're here on the last vertical column for a workshop. And then the 27th, hopefully, we will have an action item for the land development code. So we're pretty excited. Next slide. So I know that, and maybe if you press space one more time. Nope, go back. So this is the comp plan updates. I just wanted to kind of show you, these are the overall, because we really haven't seen you since transmittal, right? Nothing changed much from transmittal, so we really just wanted to give you kind of a quick overview in case because you've got your comp plan in front of you, if you have any questions. And then here are the land development code updates. So with the land development code, like Heather said, I mean, I don't know how many people look through this, experts, all of us, we comb through every word to make sure it made sense, make sure, is this what the city of Jacksonville Beach wants? And so that's why we didn't really give you a red line, because it was been a mess, to be honest. So it is almost a rewrite in terms of, we have a whole new definition section in the beginning, whereas that was Article 4 before. You have a whole new zoning map in GIS, which we were really excited about doing, and y'all know the joke about the crayon comp plan map, so I have to keep telling that one. We made sure all the statutory references were correct. Any internal references within the document, we made sure we corrected all those, and then we reorganized some of the articles. Those are kind of the overview. And then we have a definition section. Here, we'll go through each section. So Article 1, we just kind of changed that public facility standards are included in RD zoning, which is similar to a PUD zoning. The Article 2, interpretation of land development code, we wanted to remove the Board of Adjustments in the actions because it didn't quite make sense to have them in the appeal process. And then rules of construction, dates, references, all those we just reviewed. Nothing major in those 3 categories. And then Article 4, definitions. So it was, so if you look, it was Article 4, now it's Article 3. And I will say, we waited till the last moment to do the definitions, because every time we would look through it, it's like, wait, we don't have a definition for that, so let's add it. And so I think it may look like overkill that we have this massive definition section, but at least now, if you're looking through this and you're saying, well, what does that mean? You can refer to the definition, and these are best practices planning. We kind of made sure we used a bunch of different municipalities in a way, made sure it made sense for Jack's Beach too.
Well, and if I can add to that,
Please.
Claire, part of our definitions section, again, it was outdated. Some of our definitions didn't match what the statute said or Florida Building Code. So that was one of the big things that Kinley Horn did, was make sure that all of our definitions were consistent with the other documents that we use.
Yes, thank you, Heather, good point. And then decision-making bodies, administrative bodies. It was very specific when groups met in that article, and so we really wanted to make sure we had bylaws, so y'all can change the day you meet, the time if you need to. That's really the main change in that section, that article. And then I will say the development review procedures, that one had some more changes. It was really, we wanted to make sure that it was very clear the public notice process for applications, because yes, you have to follow state statutes, which is the minimum. A city can also have additional notice requirements, and so we just wanted to make sure it was very clear that who does what and when, because, and I'll give you an example. Let's go to, let's see, where's the articles? Sorry, just want to make sure we're on the same page. Literally. If you look at page 74, we added these really kind of user-friendly tables to, I know this is really dry stuff, very dry, but that's where we live, in the weeds.
But it makes it easier too for applicants, property owners, if they're saying, okay, well, I want to do a rezoning on my property, what's that process look like? What are the public notices and other things that we have to do to get through this process? So I think it makes it easier, not just for staff, for the people using the code as well for their different types of requests.
Exactly. And then sometimes you'll say, well, why isn't there a sign? Or, you know, so then you can say, like, okay, these are the applications that require a sign. These are the applications that require notices, things like that. And then one of the big things we did in this section is we beefed up the conditional use section. I think we're pretty excited about that one. We added some pretty specific, you know, so if you look on page 80, you have these standards for a conditional use application. But then if you go further on page 82, you have criteria for each type of conditional use, which we wanted to make sure. So some uses have specific criteria they have to meet, which we thought was really important because a hotel is not the same as a gas station, right? You're looking at different criteria. And then one of the other major changes on page 82, you'll see we added ADUs. So this was one of the ones where if you already are in RM1 or RM2, so you can have multifamily already by right, we allowed you to do a conditional use for an ADU, but you have to meet all this extra criteria. You have to prove you're meeting all of this. And so that was one of the kind of major changes in this section, I would say. That was new to Jack's speech. We know that people are doing them, but let's make sure they meet the criteria, right? Let's make sure they have a minimum lot size, make sure that they have a single family dwelling on there. We're preserving the single family dwelling, right? That was the purpose, because in all of our workshops we heard we want to keep that character, and this is one of the ways we're trying to keep that character, that single family. And there's a lot of criteria. If you have questions about the criteria, please let us know, or suggestions. We really vetted that a lot.
Yeah, but this whole kind of new section under conditional uses, where certain uses will have base conditions, hopefully this will help the planning commission, where you're not having to come up with those conditions. There's a base list of conditions for certain conditional uses in here, and then you would have at your discretion to still add some on should you feel they're necessary. So it could be hours of operation, or extra buffering, or lighting control, ingress, egress, the things that we've kind of done in the past. So hopefully this makes it a little bit easier, where like these things are a must, and then we can add on to those if you feel that it's warranted.
Yeah, so we felt like that was a big change. And the other stuff is just kind of clarification. Do you want to go to the next slide? Thank you.
Well, can we back up real quick?
Sure.
I know that it's the Board of Adjustment that does variances, but I do want to touch on that since it's in this section. We always had a lot of confusion from applicants with the standards applicable to variances because it was worded just very poorly. So that was one of the things that we hopefully corrected to make it easier, because it was like the answer was like a negative answer. It didn't make sense. It was supposed to be yes, but the way it was worded, you wanted to say no. So I know that applies to the Board of Adjustment, not this group, but I did want to make sure to point that out. I don't know what page that's on, I apologize.
Variances are on page 89.
Thank you. Hopefully this makes more sense for everybody, the way that they're written out.
Yep.
That's it. Just wanted to double check.
Okay, zoning districts, lot
Fun
changes. that was a long one, a lot of back and forth. So some things we changed because building code, and maybe Heather or Christian can talk about like the townhome. So there's a couple things. So we made the minimum lot sizes, the setbacks, really to try to meet what the variances were. You know, I'm not.
So, well, yeah, Christian, if you want.
Sure. Initially, when we surveyed the property throughout the city, it was pretty obvious that most zoning districts' minimum lot sizes well exceeded the average lot sizes, and in a lot of cases, even the majority of lot sizes. So we tried to bring the lot sizes down to more reasonably address the property that was platted in the 20s or 30s that makes up most of the city. So it will hopefully mean most of those lots are no longer non-conforming, and therefore won't have any reason to apply for a variance. In addition to that, when we reduce those lot sizes, we recognize that things like setbacks need to change because if you've got a very small lot, probably a 30-foot rear setback doesn't always work. So we've tried to find the middle ground for a lot of that, and then we did look at sort of the history of what variances have been approved and why, and how we can simplify that process. If people want to be able to put a pool in their backyard, we shouldn't make it terribly difficult if 99% of the time the board approves it anyway. And that's the whole lot coverage question that's in there. So we've established a 35% lot coverage, which includes the house or whatever structure, and the driveway, and then an additional 15% of impervious that would cover anything else. So if you want to put a shed in, you want to put a pool deck in, something like that, you've got that 15% to play with. But what it does is it means that that house is capped at that 35% of the driveway. And so you can't necessarily come in for a variance and say, hey, I want to build a house at 50% of the lot, because you don't qualify. Your lot's the right size, you have the right space, there's no reason for us to give you a variance. So that'll hopefully help control some of the scale issues that we've had, while making it easier for existing homes to be able to, put amenities in the backyard and renovate and things like that. And although we're not there yet, it's kind of connected. We've also made it so that non-conforming single-family homes do not have to jump through all the hoops to be able to renovate or put on small additions. So we've taken single-family, and they're not all single-family, just standalone single-family homes. So they're to kind of help preserve that and not make them have to go through a 2-month variance process to address setbacks that were, built in the 50s. So hopefully with all of those things, we've tried to bring the code more in alignment with what is here, what people have done in the past, what's been approved, and generally what was acceptable to council.
Way better explanation than I would have done. Yeah, that was a big chunk of it. We updated the townhome definition, and also because of how Florida Building Code does it, we wanted to make sure that's aligned. Also, there was some concern about these rows of townhomes and how there's not a lot of differentiation. And so what we did is we said that basically townhomes are in 4-unit blocks now, maximum, instead of a 6-unit townhome or an 8-unit townhome, where you get this huge linear flat front. That was a major concern of a lot of people, is we don't like these huge, massive blocks. Well, how do you address that? They're allowed to do what they're allowed to do, right? And so we said, well, let's just do 4 units to help differentiate that.
Also, part of that is we've taken the definition of a 2-family dwelling, duplex, which was always something a little contentious just by its nature, but also because the building code doesn't recognize that as a type of structure. We've moved that concept into a 2-unit townhome. So in places where the density allows a little bit more, but not full townhome, you can do a 2-unit townhome, whereas before we required at least 3. And then we've changed the sizes of townhomes and setbacks to make them basically big enough to have a 2-car driveway in every lot, and make them wider than 15 feet for the interior ones. So trying to address concerns that we've heard, about the overbuilding of lots and things like that. So and we've removed that attached, the little breezeway thing. So if you're doing townhomes, you're townhomes, but in the urban areas, we've also created what's called an urban single family, which is basically those row houses that were attached with the little breezeways. Although we've made the lots a little bit bigger, we've made the setbacks a little bit bigger, so they won't be crammed in quite as tight. But that way, If you just want to build a couple of single-family homes that are small, but make sense in an urban environment, you can do that. Or you can do townhomes, but there's no breezeway to try and get around some of the code requirements.
Okay.
So just to be clear, those can be marketed as single family, urban single family, as opposed to attached townhomes.
And again, if it's something that doesn't meet the building code definition of attached single family, then, we're the fire marshal that really was just creating problems, wasn't solving them, so getting rid of that little, roof, I think, was a good plan.
Yeah, so essentially the same products can be developed, just calling it something different, and again, it aligns better with the Florida Building Code, so it makes it easier for everybody,
So it's something you build, they don't have to be attached to a breezeway.
Correct.
basically.
Yep.
Yeah.
But also the lot requirements are a little bit bigger, so
I
they're
mean,
not-
I get it, I live across from one of these things.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And just to add on to the townhouse changes, again, 4 in a row instead of 6 in a row across the board throughout the whole city, wider lots. And one thing that came up in one of our workshops with council is that thing that Blair mentioned with this wall of building. And so we put in there for townhouses, if there's 3 or more, I think is what we did, 3 or more, they have to be offset. So you get one that's here, 3 feet for the next one, 3 feet up, so that they're not just a wall, but there's some architectural variation in the building face. So we've added that in there as well, just to give some, flexibility, with the way that they look from the street. And again, widening the lot so you can get that 2-car driveway, 2-car garage in some cases if you go wider than the minimum, but hopefully all of those changes fix a lot of problems that we've heard in all of these workshops, even before we started this process. Moving forward, of course, all the existing product that's out there now is grandfathered in. It will stay, pretty much how it is. I don't think there's anything else with the townhouses that we already talked about ADUs.
We removed the 0 lot line single family.
Right, it was a product that nobody was building.
Nobody was using.
And so did it make sense to keep it in the code? Again, we tried to look at what's actually on the ground, what are people building, and that just wasn't one of those things.
Can you refresh my memory of what that was?
So 0 lot line, single family, it only makes sense if you could do several in a row, and the whole idea, and it's done, like, I've seen communities in South Florida, Orlando, where they do this in mass scale, where one side of the building can be on the property line, and then the next house over has to be at least 15 feet away. So you have people with no side yard on one side and a big side yard on the other. But what happens because of the building and fire codes is that side that's on the property line will have no windows. It's just a really strange product that is used in some places.
The intent to create a larger yard on one side, is that?
I really don't.
Kind of like the concept of like a Charleston single house where you've got the private yard in the house. So you get more of a linear design, but then it creates issues with
I've
Yeah,
never seen one of those come up.
We don't have it here.
There's a
So-
couple in
Yeah,
Atlantic Beach.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's why we kind of got rid of it, because it didn't make sense.
Sorry, I'll use my microphone.
Okay, yell that. Sorry, Monica.
Sorry.
But just another, thing too, that I'm just kind of going off script here, so I
Please.
apologize. When we looked at each one of the zoning districts, we went through use by use to make sure that, do these make sense? Are these the uses that make sense here? Do we have to add something that is required by Florida statute? So, I don't know what you're on here, but one of them, it's like family, not family daycares, what's the one?
Oh,
There's certain things that statute requires us to allow, so.
daycare home.
We may have changed some of the language, but all the uses, essentially remain the same.
Child daycare services?
Yeah, basically it's broken into 2 categories. One is a house that has 5 or less with children, so if you want to drop your kids off at the aunt's house, you can do that.
Yeah,
Anything bigger than that has to be
homes.
regulated through the state. So once it crests that threshold, then it goes into certain zoning categories, the conditional use, and we put those conditions on there about minimum sizes and things like that, stacking. So the state has preempted us on little things, but the bigger stuff we've made clearer and hopefully put some regulations in to make them more compatible.
We did add outdoor display of specific retail merchandise in commercial and zoning districts as permitted use. We added
Yeah,
that.
so this came up with a few businesses around town that were putting things that belong outside, like bikes and outdoor furniture, outside, which the code doesn't allow. So we had a few conversations with city council on kind of what's the best practice that makes sense for the city. And so what we kind of boiled it down to was to allow certain types of retail merchandise to be displayed outside during operating hours, not to exceed a certain size. So that way the bike shop can put their bikes outside, and a store that sells, teak outdoor furniture can put a small display area outside. It will require some more enforcement through code enforcement, but, our code enforcement officers were made aware of some of these changes. And it's a start. We may expand it, we may contract it to see how well it works or doesn't work, which can be said for a lot of sections of the code that we maybe
Yeah, that's a,
review in about a year, 18 months, tweak stuff if we think it maybe was, we left out, I think we put plants, outdoor furniture, and bicycles.
Yeah, bikes, plants, and
We
outdoor
may find that we
furniture.
accidentally excluded something, and, can go in and tweak that later, but, that came from some discussions with council, from their discussions with some business owners that were looking for some help. On the same line, and I know we haven't gotten to this yet, but in our sign, sign section of the land development code, we have a lot of businesses want to put out little A-frame signs, like, hey, we're open, Labor Day sale, what have you. That wasn't allowed by the code, it was only allowed in the central business district. So we went back in and added that any commercial use in a commercial zoning district can have one little A-frame sign outside their front door, within, I think, 3 feet of the front door, not on public property. Because that really is a good way, and there's been research that shows that is a good way to draw in business. Your sign's out there, you're open. So, little things like that that may not sound like a big thing might actually really end up helping some businesses that, need to let people know that they're open. Because you drive down 3rd Street, the people going 40, 50 miles an hour, shouldn't be, but they are. And, they might see stuff like that. So, we heard the business community say, these things will help us. So we put some of those things in there with the hope that it will.
and I think it's a recognition that, a lot of our commercial spaces are really more of an urban layout, a lot smaller. And it's better than having, blinking open signs, if you could have something more tasteful, and you're a coffee shop, you want to put a menu item out there, so I think, again, addressing the need.
Yep.
As far as the uses go in the zoning districts, they pretty much stayed consistent with what was in there now, with some tweaks like we've talked about, and some adjustments to make sure that, again, it was consistent with industry standards, Florida building code, and Florida statute.
Yep. Okay. Site development standards. This was kind of a big one because it has the parking in there. So if we go to, if you look, page 155 is kind of the new table for the parking requirements. And we really based all of those parking either on ITE or something that was more appropriate, because there was a lot of kind of variances for parking, and there was a lot of weird parking standards that didn't really make sense either. And so we wanted to make sure they were compatible with today's standards, because, and also Jack's Beach, it was an old code that needed to be rewritten.
In a lot of cases, the parking standard was really creating, once again, a need for variances because the lots are so small. We have a lot of, 1970 construction that you're not going to tear the building down because it's still functional, but it can't meet a lot of parking requirements. But also recognizing that, the city in general is trying to promote more of a multimodal environment where people are encouraged to ride their bikes or take their golf cart or walk. So providing some tweaks to the minimum parking, and then providing options for people to reduce that parking requirement by providing amenities for alternate transportation. So if you could put in 2 golf cart spaces in lieu of a full parking space, then we'll give you credit for that kind of thing.
If we have questions, is it better to just interrupt or wait till the end?
Either way, if you've got a question, then just
On that
ask, go
topic,
ahead.
why is that based, just succinctly, why is that based off of square footage and not of capacity?
For which one?
For parking places for, like restaurants and various things like that.
I mean, that's how we have it now. It's pretty much an industry standard for just kind of general commercial. It's usually done by square footage. Other things might be done by number of seats, like an auditorium or a church, for example. Some other things, and I think we took it out, but salon was based on number of chairs, for example. So it's
Particularly for restaurants, a lot of the state requirements for how you obtain your restaurant alcohol license is tied to a very similar structure. So they count your gross square footage, including the kitchen space. They count, your number of seats and that kind of stuff. So it's trying to keep it a little bit consistent with how other agencies are doing that as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because like Strings, for example, clearly doesn't have enough parking places for the amount of people looking for their max occupancy. So just a question on my side, I'll continue contemplating.
And it's good to look at, because we also looked at it from the lens of regulation, and seats can be moved and taken out, and so then what do you do? So at least then that's like square footage. It's easier for when they're looking at the application to say, okay, you've got 5,000 square feet, this is how many parking
Got it.
spaces. Because I would say seats can maybe be fudged,
Yeah, that makes sense.
right?
Thanks.
And then, thank you for your question. And then we have specific parking for the CBD, which you already had that. We just wanted to make it very clear. And then also, we did create, one of the bigger things is we created a downtown incentive zone parking exemption. Say that 5 times fast. So basically, we're saying in this area, you don't have to provide parking unless you're a hotel, right? Because we don't want to, hotels need parking. And,
or residential.
or residential or existing RD zoning districts, because they probably already have a parking standard they are required to provide. And then also, if you look on page 160 is our reductions page, the parking reductions page. We really wanted to make sure that we're promoting multimodal here in Jack's Beach. And so I really would love for y'all to kind of look over those few pages before we go to the hearing and just ask us questions. We really think we kind of tweaked and made it make sense for Jack's Beach, but if you have any comments or questions, let us know. This is totally new to this code.
I have a question about the exemption. So if there is no parking required, are they required to have spaces for bike parking?
So, yeah, good question.
We didn't make bike
We
parking
didn't.
required, no, but it wouldn't apply to all properties. It would apply to those that have primary or secondary access on First Street, because that's supposed to be a pedestrian corridor. So what our goal with that is to get rid of surface parking lots on First Street in that pedestrian focused area.
Also, the CRA's put a lot of bike racks in that area on public streets.
Yeah,
I mean,
and there's plans
supposed
to
be
add
limited,
more, but
supposed to
there's
mesh,
so much construction going on right now that we have flagged certain areas for bike racks, but when that property redevelops, because right now there's no reason to put them there, so there are more coming for sure. But putting in bike racks is a way to actually reduce some of the parking as well.
Yeah, so some of
incentives.
the businesses were required to have some sort of bike parking, there really isn't enough.
No, I 100% agree, there's not enough. That's why we're trying to encourage more bike parking, not only that the city is installing, but that the private businesses will install.
There are a couple projects that have started that have substantial bike parking as well
Yeah.
along that corridor. They're just not under construction yet, so.
Good question though.
Yeah. And then since we're right there on page 161, the payment in lieu of off-street parking. Gosh, that was really convoluted for staff to really calculate, and so we tried to make it as easy as possible. It's really, we didn't tweak it too much except for how it's calculated. So if you look at page 162 under 2, so the amount per space to be paid in lieu shall be administratively reviewed and established on an annual basis. So then you basically take the current construction cost of a parking structure, not a parking space, parking structure, and then the cost of annual maintenance by the number of off-street parking spaces and then the total payment. So we tried not to make it complex. It's slightly complex. It's a lot less complex than it used to be.
Random question, Heather Christian. Are we like having somebody put a bid in every year as a city for what it costs to build a parking structure every year to keep that number updated?
Right now, no, because the process is really complicated right now. It's based on property values in 2010 or 2011, and then you have to like increase 3% every year, and every block is a different value. Because they were basing it on property value, not the cost to construct a parking space. That is not going to change, whether it's over here or over there. It was tied to the land values, which makes it very confusing and it makes it very expensive, which is why almost nobody's used it. We've had 2 properties take advantage of this in the time that it's been in play because it's just too confusing and expensive. So we were trying to make it less confusing, less expensive, so that it makes sense. And even the downtown is the only place where public parking exists.
Do we want more businesses to use it?
If it makes sense for them to use it. And it the whole reason that it was created was being previous administrations, got rid of the ability to request a variance from parking downtown. So this was their answer to that, but it didn't work. So again, I fully expect that we're going to look at this in a year and maybe have to tweak it a little bit to see, how can we make this work if we want businesses to use it. We might find that they're not using it now anyway because we've decreased the parking requirement downtown. We've added a parking exemption area for certain properties. You can get relief from parking if you do other types of parking, bike racks, golf carts, compact, that sort of thing. So there's now a lot of tools in the toolbox instead of one tool. Before it was just you provide the parking or you pay your way out of it. Now we have all these other ways to do it. They can all be combined. So maybe someone says, well, I need 20 parking spaces, but I'm going to add a big bike rack and I'm going to do golf cart spaces, so that gets me out of half. But I still only want to provide, let's say, 3. I'll buy my way out of the rest. So now there's more ways to kind of get to where you're going.
I guess in a roundabout way, my concern there is just kind of reading it the way it's written, that the city's going to be budgeting every year to pay a contractor or somebody to provide a quote for that?
No, to get that number, no. We'll come up with a base number and adjust it annually. We're going to start with a base number, just like they did back in 2010. So here's the base land value for these blocks, which were all different. So there'll be a base number, and then again, it'll increase every year, but it'll be one calculation, not 30 blocks worth of calculations. So it should be more simple.
I was just worried about the current construction costs.
Well, what I was going to say is part of that is tied to the fact that, like, when you're doing fee calculations for the building code, they have a standard that they use per square foot for residential and commercial, and that's the kind of information that they're collecting anyway. So it's probably not a big ask to find that as well and add that in for surface parking, because it's designed to be standardized across the state, so it's fair.
Just one more question about this. So I think it's generally a good idea because I think businesses are in their self-interest to get the amount of parking that they need for the business, right? So that's going to vary. It says current construction cost of a comparable parking structure. What comparable parking structure? Because this is like per space, right? Mm-hmm. That you're trying to buy. So I'm not really following what comparable parking structure is.
So surface parking versus a garage. The cost of construction of a garage parking space is significant.
One space in garage parking.
Yeah, it would be prorated basically.
Okay, so if they wanted to buy the way out of 2 spaces, it would be the cost to construct 2 spaces in a garage. So.
And that's basically how we do it now,
Okay.
but again, on a block by block basis. So yeah. It's a little weird.
Okay, so those were kind of the big things about parking that we wanted to chat with y'all. Supplemental standards, we cleaned up a lot of that. We also, what we did is remove specific conditions from some supplemental standards, put them in the conditional use, right? Makes more sense, right? To have it all in one space. What else did we do? Clarified parking of the heavy vehicles, the short-term vacation rental section. We decreased the maximum occupancy, and maybe Heather can speak to that because that was a big one
Sure.
that we talked to council about.
Yeah, so we went in and updated the STDR section. It is fairly new, so we didn't want to make a whole lot of changes, but right now, the ordinance and the process is a little cumbersome for everybody, property owners and staff and, everyone in between. So, like Blair mentioned, decrease the maximum occupancy from 16 to 12, because that is something we still have control over from the state. They didn't preempt us on that. Fingers crossed they don't. And required all properties to register, because right now, it's only some properties, single family and townhouse basically. So we're missing all of the apartments and condos and multifamily properties. They just kind of like get a free pass. So we didn't really think that that was equitable. If we're gonna make people register, let's make them all register. So that was something council supported. And then requiring them to essentially sign an affidavit if they're gonna do all these other things through the state and the county that they're required to do, because there's been some confusion. Because if the property says, well, I'm exempt from registering with Jack's Beach because I'm a multifamily property, they kind of skip doing it with the county and the state. But we need them to do all of those things. So we're probably make some more tweaks to that down the road. I don't know if anything's gonna come through the state this year to try to give control back to the communities or take more away. We don't know yet. There have not been any bills filed yet, but there's always chatter about that kind of stuff. So we don't know if any statutes coming down the pipe are going to impact us more. But we thought if we can make some changes now, maybe we could put us in a better position down the road. So.
Is there a penalty if they don't register?
Well, see, that's the hard part, because we can't like padlock their door and tell them not to rent out their property. We can fine them, and that's another thing we're doing. We haven't gotten to that section yet. Right now, we can take violators of the code to the special magistrate. The magistrate can issue a fine. Some communities have the ability to do citations. So I see your grass is overgrown. This is your warning. If I come back in 7 days and it's still overgrown, you're getting a $100 fine. We don't do that now. We've added in that section, which is the enforcement proceedings and penalties, very last article, that we will have the ability to issue kind of on-the-spot citations for certain things after a certain amount of time, where you basically get a ticket. It's not a parking ticket, it's a your grass is too tall ticket. So we've added that ability in the code to do that, and then assuming that that's good with everybody, we'll move forward with the process to do that. So
Yeah, we
there's
haven't
some,
fleshed out how it's gonna work yet, we just put in the goals of it. We'll have to develop the fee structure and types of things
Right.
that we would cite and take that into account.
but there'll be tiers of violations. So if you're this tier, it's automatic citation, life safety stuff, for example. And I think that we could fairly put short-term vacation rentals in that life safety category, because you have people staying in a property that hasn't been inspected by the fire marshal. You hope it's safe, but again, it's a business being operated from a residential property, and the fire marshal wants to look at every single one of them. So that's kind of a tool that we have, where if we get to that point in the process and we're like, you don't register, here's your warning, and if you don't do it, now we're gonna issue a citation. Now there's fines involved that will accumulate outside of taking them to the special magistrate. So right now, there's very little, unfortunately, because the state has preempted us in so many ways with short-term rentals, there's very little we can do, but that is something that we can do, so.
So, yeah, just to comment on that, putting this in here is a good start, but it can't be the end, because changing land development code is not going to solve the problem of people not following land development code.
Right.
Like, there are multiple examples of violations right now, and the reason they're violating is because there's no consequence to it.
Right, and again, it comes back to, there's no consistency right now in our code with who has to register. If everybody has to register, it's a level playing field, and we can say, no, you're not exempt. Owner-occupied units, I think that's fair to exempt them, because they're living in the house, they're renting out maybe a room or two. I think that that's pretty standard across the board, but yeah, we need more ability to say, you're not doing what you're supposed to, there's a consequence to that, and we just don't have it now. Because if we have 1,000 properties that are STDRs and 500 haven't registered, we have one attorney and one code enforcement officer and one magistrate. We'd have to hire a whole team of people to deal with that, to go through that process and say, you didn't register, $250 a day if you don't. There's just not the manpower to do it. No city has the ability to really do that with normal staffing. We'd have to have a whole team. So we don't want to do that. We want people to come into compliance, and for the most part they are, but there's always that confusion. Well, what type of property am I? Do I need to register? Do I not? So by making everybody do it, level playing field, then we know who we can go after from that point on. Assuming the state doesn't preempt us from that.
Could you remind me what section the short-term vacation rental?
It's in supplemental standards.
Page 184.
I
I had it there. I was looking at it.
Are short-term vacation rentals owners required to register, like all of them from this moment forward, once this is passed, or do they grandfather in? I can't remember that.
We have not written any grandfathering in. If you have one, you gotta register.
You gotta register.
So it'll probably take us a while to get caught up.
You also have to re-register every year to renew your registration.
Right.
So even if you
So-
get it this time, we're gonna get you the next time.
We'll have to start with a new education campaign, like, hey, our code's changed, everybody's gotta register now, and we've gotta give people time to, we do have a lot of owners that don't live here, so we're gonna have to give time to reach out to them, have them come and
Is
provide.
registering a short-term rental, is that a standard across like other cities and?
Not everybody does it, no.
Because I remember we were saying, I honestly wouldn't even know if I had a short-term rental that it even a thing.
Yeah.
Would never cross my mind.
Yeah, well, we
Therefore,
have
we
been
do it.
using a platform that searches them out, and then we send them letters to say, hey, we found you, register with the city. Right, they probably do, a lot of them do, but we do get a lot of people coming to compliance. So, especially the bigger groups that have multiple properties they manage, they actually are doing a really good job coming into compliance. But some cities require it, some cities don't at all, because maybe they don't have that many, or it's not a problem, and we have maybe 3 problem properties out of 1,000. But it's more about getting that safety inspection from the fire marshal and knowing where they are, and if there's a problem, we have someone we can contact. That's where that responsible party requirement comes into play. We have a contact that we can reach out to if there's a code enforcement complaint, a police department noise complaint, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the push to make them register. If council decides they don't want to do it anymore, this part of the code goes out the window, but we can make them register right now. The state allows us to do that, and that's about it, and do inspections.
So in the definition of short-term vacation rental, it also says units renting 50% or less. So it seems like renting 50% or more of the property. But is there a time stipulation that we would want to say? Because short-term vacation rentals, somebody might decide to Airbnb for a month or 2 or
Right.
3, and then
So there is, yes, that's a great question. There is a state definition that we're using now. So there's two definitions that come into play. There's transient housing, which is not permanent housing, so that's what the short-term rentals fall under. And then it's considered a short-term rental if they rent out more than 3 times a year for less than 30 days each. So that's what qualifies it in the state's eyes as a short-term rental.
we clarify that in the code?
Yes, it's under definitions.
I'm
Our
looking under
much longer
definitions.
extended definitions section.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in the very beginning of the code. So we've fixed
No,
that
that's where I'm
definition to
looking.
match the states.
I'm looking in page 56, short-term vacation rental does not reference the state code.
So we've broken it up a little bit because the 50%, that's that owner-occupied dwelling unit. So I live in my home, but I rent out a bedroom as a short-term rental. If it's less than 50% of the actual building space, not 50% of the time, that's what exempts you. The state doesn't, I haven't referenced the statute number, but that's
Oh, it's
what-
not necessary to reference
Yeah.
the state because.
Yeah, it's just more
inherent in that.
consistent with, this definition is now more consistent with the statute. Before we just had single family, 2-family, and townhouse. We've added multifamily in there.
And where, okay, and then, so the short-term vacation rental definition of the state would apply to this definition?
Yeah, we've
Even
made,
though it's not
we've made
referenced
this more
specifically.
consistent, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, and if we need to tweak that, we'll double check
We'll
it,
double
but
check it.
there wasn't consistency before because, again, and that leads to a lot of confusion. So a lot of people go, well, I don't really know what my property is, I'm not gonna do it. Well, that's not what we want. We want everyone to do it. So we can get that inspection done, we can get that contact information. It's not a big revenue driver for the city, but if you add up 1,000, if they're just paying the local business tax of $80 a year, I mean, that adds up.
Right, I think my concern and why I like this registration and opportunity to get more information about it is just frankly because it takes available housing off the market.
It absolutely
And,
does.
you know,
Yeah.
you've got to balance the desires of the property owners
Yeah.
there and people looking for housing.
Yeah, and it is unfortunate that for whatever reason, we didn't see it come in, and I say that back up 15 years. If you had rules in place prior to 2011, you can keep them. We did not, the city did not. We didn't work here, so, you know. Will not be good for that, but we're doing what we can do now, and this is pretty much it.
And did you say the fine was $250 per day for not
So
registering?
the magistrate can set fines, we can't do that administratively, but yes, that's pretty standard, $250 a day if you don't come into compliance. But usually there's a period of time that you're allowed to bring your property into compliance. We just haven't taken any short-term rentals there. We have to prove that they're renting, and people get sneaky and they take their property off the platform and they put it back on when we're not looking. I mean, people really truly do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to prove. You have to be like, again, a dedicated staff just to do that.
Yeah, I guess the reason I'm asking that is also just because folks who don't live here may end up with many thousands of dollars in fines if they're not notified in a timely manner, if they're not aware of the code change, and I don't want them to suffer. As much as I want available housing, I also don't want
Right.
property owners who
Right.
are renting them out to,
Yeah,
suffer.
agreed. And again, with the new code and when we get to the citation section, developing that program and adding that to it, we're gonna not just start finding people, we're gonna educate them first. I mean, that's one of the main goals of code enforcement, is to educate people with what they can and can't do with their property so that they're not violating. And the goal is always to get voluntary compliance, not to punish them and fine them and put liens on their property. We don't want to do that. We want them to come into compliance. So, but again, with short-term rentals, the state has very, very clearly said you cannot ban them unless you had rules in place before 2011. So we're kind of stuck with doing what we can. And hopefully this will help. I don't know what it'll do for the housing stock, honestly. I mean,
Well, I think just having some
it's-
friction, having some data, I think
Yeah.
is helpful, and it'll help us get our.
with kind of that threat of a citation, it might hopefully bring more people into compliance. And
Just out of curiosity, because I know we've talked about before, like the state mandated, can't go against the state. Why can't we go against the state?
because we will get sued immediately.
And
Are you going to pay for that? Because I'm not.
We also,
does anybody pay for it?
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, honestly, at what point
Yeah.
do cities stand up to the state and say enough's enough and we can't continue to develop the way we want to, so we have to put our foot
Well, I
down
mean,
and stop?
We are in the background. That's what
Just curious.
lobbyists do. That's what our council members, our elected officials, they go to Tallahassee every year and they lobby for the things that we want to see, whether we want them to do something or we don't want them to do something. So the short-term rental lobby, unfortunately, has been stronger than the municipal and county lobby that says, please let us do what we want to do in our communities. And they said, no, you can't ban short-term rentals, you can't ban food trucks, you can't do this, you can't do that. I mean, it happens every session. That's why we keep an eye on what's going on in Tallahassee to figure out, well, what are they going to tell us we can't do next? Because it is a real threat, and I don't think that anybody in the city would want to go forward with just changing our rules against the state statute because it wouldn't end well. So we're not going to do that. Good question, though.
Again, though, I do think the data that you're gonna collect through this initiative, I think is gonna be very valuable, because today you can't even point to a number of like this many units are being used for that purpose, and this
Yeah.
gets a little closer to having
It's-
some information.
It's tricky because, again, the company that we've been using and paying to find these units, their information is only good as the information that the people owning and renting the units put out there. So it might be a full house and they've called it an apartment. So do we make them register or not? What is it actually? There's a lot of manual work that goes into figuring out, what it actually is, what are they renting it for? And then, like you said, someone might just go, oh, I'm gonna rent my house out for PGA week. That's it, they do it once. They get a letter from us going, well, I don't rent my house out. So there's a lot of complicated stuff that goes into short-term rentals and registering them and managing that program. So I wish it was a little bit more clear-cut, but it's not. Okay.
All right, and then sign standards, Heather had already kind of alluded to it. We allowed A-frame signs, and then we also removed non-conforming pole signs. We wanted to be a little bit more strict on those non-conforming pole signs.
Yeah, it's probably worth mentioning that we changed the code in 2010, 2011, did you find? Anyway, we had banned pole signs a long time ago, and there are provisions in the code, basically, if they're non-conforming, they can stay, you can do them maintenance, but at some point, they're supposed to come into compliance and turn into monument signs. Unfortunately, after 20 years, that hasn't happened. There's still a lot of them out there, so we're putting in a sunset provision that basically says you've got 5 years to figure out how to bring your sign into compliance. So it's a process we used in the Arlington zoning overlay when I was with Jacksonville for landscaping and fencing, and it worked pretty well. They did one extension out there, but I think they had too much less affluent area, so those businesses struggled a little bit more. But
I think that was it. And then for subdivision standards, we just changed some final plat language, nothing major. Public facility standards, really just kind of cleaning that one up. Development agreements, we wanted to make sure it met Florida state statutes. There was, did I take out the site development standards? Bring in landscape standards in Article 7. Guess I didn't put a bullet point for that, but I was trying to make this presentation succinct. It's a lot of dry, boring stuff. So we did make, I feel we made the landscape standards a little bit more clear on who needs to provide what in terms of commercial, residential. And we also kind of added salt tolerant and native trees so you can kind of understand what's salt tolerant. We felt like that was very important here. And then we also added a kind of a quick, easy table for you to understand, like if I'm on a residential lot, what am I required to do for landscaping? And the sign standards, that's right, there's a bunch of divisions in there.
Do you have a page reference for them?
Yep, so if you go to 204, so if you're, you need a shade tree for every 3,000 square feet. And then if you look at page 200, that's the table where we said, like, these are shade trees, these are high salt tolerant, and these are native. So we thought that was helpful because, oaks sometimes don't like to be super close to the ocean.
Right, and we had a lot of, developers and landscaper architects asking, well, what can I plant? And well, now we have a list, so hopefully that's going to be, easier for folks to digest and make those decisions on what they want to plant, what's considered a shade tree, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
previously we referenced a document that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, lots of old references. I'm like, I can't even find this one. There was a couple I couldn't even find. Okay, yeah. So nonconformities. We increased the maintenance and repair limit from 15 to 35% of the assessed value. We did, back to Christian's point, we added flexibility for non-conforming existing historic single families to remain in place. So that kind of goes back to trying to preserve that character of these existing homes that have been here for 60 years, 70 years. And then the enforcement proceedings, that's the last one. That's where we added that we can do citations now. And once we kind of get our feet under us, we'll figure out the fee schedule and how that works. But at least now we have a tool in the toolbox for that.
Page references are valuable as you're going through your AWS.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'll tab those kind of special ones. Yeah, I should have tabbed.
You live in it, we're just getting.
Right.
Yeah.
Even I'm not keeping up with her right now.
Yeah, at this point.
We covered all the sections. We want to make sure we get all your questions answered, and we realize you guys have not read all 316 pages. We wouldn't have expected you to, because that's just ridiculous. But David, you read all the pages.
Just 300.
Just,
Oh, Jim, don't run
I've
there.
never even seen it.
But we really want to encourage you guys to meet with us over the next 2 weeks, because when we come back to you on the 27th, which, by the way, that meeting is at Parks. This room is not available. They're upgrading all the AV equipment. So we want you guys to be prepared. So please, please, please reach out to me or Christian or both. And we'll take as much time with each one of you individually as you need to get any questions answered. If you find typos, I know they're going to be in there. We've done the best we can. All of us up here, including people who aren't sitting here, have combed through this document.
Yeah.
Staff internally to my department is going through it now as well, because the more eyes we can get on it, the better. We're going to miss stuff. I mean, it's a huge document.
It was probably wrong to begin with, not.
Yeah, probably something that's
That's
wrong that
what
we
we
missed. That's a good point. But we really have tried to listen to everything that everybody has provided in all of the opportunities and workshops and so forth.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a valid point. I mean, we tried to take all those workshops and take the concerns of the citizens and y'all and council and really try to make the comp and the land development code reflect.
Make it make sense.
And there, you know, back to the short-term rental, it's like, cancel them, get rid of them, well, we can't do that. So at least we came up with some kind of way to help a little bit.
Margaret, you had a question?
Yeah, I understood that we probably need to meet one-on-one, but I do have one kind of question that's a little bit more global than just specific to. On page 13, there's a definition of bedroom. And in 1A, it says for site-built dwellings, it's a room that can be used for sleeping that has a minimum of 70 square feet of conditioned space. So I don't know what conditioned space is, and condition is not, and maybe it's a term of art that everybody knows what it means.
Well, so those are, a lot of our definitions are, Florida, yes, it is. It's Florida Building Code definition of what is considered a bedroom. Yeah, so conditioned is air conditioned space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean cool though, because the Florida
Well, yeah.
Building Code requires that it be heated, but not air conditioned.
So not a garage, not a
So
shed,
it's-
it's not an unfinished
Yeah, that makes
space. Yeah.
Okay, so that's just one, like.
Yeah, and there are gonna be a
specific-
lot of new definitions in here that are Florida Building Code or statute that weren't in here before, and that now that, you know,
Okay.
it's going to be new to everybody.
Okay, the larger question though is, for site-built dwellings, you need to have 70 square feet. And for manufactured homes, you only need to have 50 square feet. And so we put in the comp plan that we want to look at housing affordability and different ways to get there, including tiny homes and bungalow courts and like all those things. By putting the minimum square footage of the house itself, which we also do, like some communities are not doing that anymore, or
Right.
being more liberal about allowing for smaller homes.
Right.
We're doing accessory dwelling units, yes, we're doing that, but that's pretty limited. So we're kind of excluding, and we're also not having the community conversation in a way that I'm familiar with about what's gonna work in Jack's Beach.
Right.
So I just, that's kind of the philosophical
Sure.
question.
No, I appreciate that. So we did-
Because I don't see it in this,
Yeah.
because we're doing it kind of old style.
So some of those definitions, like our Florida Building Code, for example, we're gonna go with that because we don't really have the ability to go outside of it. But we did decrease the minimum square footage in all of our residential zoning districts by at least 100 square feet each, if not more. So we did reduce the minimum size, like, so right now RS1 is 1,600 square feet, I think we took that down to 1,400 square
Right,
feet.
I saw that.
And we can go even lower, but we've kind of
Got pushback on that. as well.
yeah, we decreased it a little bit. Someone could still do a tiny home village if we did it creatively. There's ways to do it,
By
PUD,
doing
for
PUD,
example.
right.
Right.
Okay.
But we've added studio, for example, as a product, you know, not a bedroom. We've added the ADUs, so we've added some stuff. I think that will help with that a little bit.
Okay, I guess what I'm really kind of going for is the community conversation about what's going to work in Jack's Beach.
Right.
And I don't think we're really doing that, and that's beyond the scope of what we're doing here.
Probably, yeah.
But it just a thought, it sort of made me kind of realize the comp plan, and of course there's supposed to be visions and they're supposed to, you know, look
Yeah.
way out and stuff, but
Yeah.
still, the how do you get there?
Yeah.
And the other thing is we're kind of not articulating that we are allowing for smaller homes. I don't know.
Right,
Like,
like
are we
call it out
consciously doing
outright.
this? Are we telling the community we're consciously doing this because we're going in
Yeah.
that direction? We're
So-
kind of- I don't know.
I've made a note of this because at the briefing right before this, council was talking about their next set of priorities moving forward. We've got the strategic plan. Almost all the projects in there have been done or are really getting close to completion. They're gonna start over again and say, all right, we did this batch. What are we gonna be looking forward to in the next 4 to 5 years? And that might be one of the discussions that they wanna have. And I'm gonna bring it up to the city manager and at least get it on everybody's radar for perhaps a council priority moving forward to discuss that and discuss where, what that looks like. So I think that's a really good point. Because again, we all know what Live Local is, but it might not happen in Jack's Beach ever because property values are so high. So we might have to look at other ways to encourage affordable housing beyond what we can do here, beyond what the state has provided as a tool. There's no reason why we can't come up with our own ways to encourage that and incentivize that. So you're right, it isn't a full discussion that's been had on its own, kind of, to discuss that in specifics. But I think it's a good conversation that needs to be had, so.
No, I maybe just to add to that, I think you have a good point. We tend to like get in the weeds and we're not like, hey, what we're doing this for, why are we doing this? And there's so many things that we've changed that it's hard to kind of, it's hard to
I
also
think that's
choose
a
your own
biggie.
point.
I mean, I think that's worth kind of saying that,
Yeah.
there's intention here.
Yeah.
We're going
Yeah,
in that
you
direction.
mentioned
And
reduce
we
all
could
of
refer to the comp plan, it made its way into the comp plan, so.
Yeah.
we must be-
Baby steps, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
as you know, and I think you're the one that called the code elderly or geriatric, which is like right on the mark. It is. I hope this is much better. I hope that we provided a lot more tools for everybody to use. Developers, homeowners, businesses, that's the goal really, is to provide, not to say, this is what it is, end of story, but let's provide a bigger toolbox with more tools in it, and hopefully we've done that. And again, we're gonna look at it more often than we've been doing in the last several decades and say, what's working, what's not, what do we need to tweak? So it's our code, we can do that.
What's the revision period they say on this?
The what?
How often is it going to be looked at? Every year, yearly?
For us internally, annually.
Okay.
It might not come before planning commission or council unless we find the need to change, to tweak something, or if you guys or council has brought something to our attention they want to
That's
discuss
basically
and
what I'm
tweak.
asking. Is there going to be a specific planning commission meeting yearly?
Yeah, what I would like to do is be able to provide everybody with kind of like a year-end, outlook, like, hey, especially next year, come this time next year. Our code's a year old, what did we find that's working, what maybe needs to be tweaked, and really report out to you guys, and vice versa. You guys
And
have your stuff that we
apologize, I
don't.
haven't seen it in there. It's not codified in here.
No, it's not. That's more of a policy
Review.
thing for our department. Yeah. Well, it is actually. In the very
Okay,
beginning,
fine.
it says it'll be reviewed, I think, at least every 5 years. I think it says at least every 5 years where we would look at it holistically, but internally, from a policy standpoint, we'll be looking at
I
it
just
every
think it's
year.
worthwhile to consider
Yeah,
one planning commission meeting per year to do this,
yeah.
right? Any changes, anything
I
that
would
you see,
love to
like a
do
brief
that.
from the professional planners to the commission saying, here's what
Yeah.
we noticed.
Yeah, that's on our agenda to provide that to you guys and to council as well. Here's what we've discovered with our new code.
And that's one of the things we're gonna talk about when we get to the bylaw stage, is how you guys are gonna be structuring your time and things like that, so that'll be a good place to put that. Because there is a vague reference to having an organizational meeting once a year, but it's not really defined, so we've tried to put that in the bylaws, so. And we'll bring those to you once we get through this stage. They won't be officially adopted until after this is, but we will probably in February start talking about that.
So, I like what you said, Margo, about expressing the intent in there. I mean, although it's a code, having some kind of subjective intent behind what's in the code there, I think makes a lot of sense. We're referencing out to comp plan. I like that a lot. The other thing, just a question on process here. So I have a handful of notes, handful of things that I might recommend or think about that I want to share with y'all. Does that end up in the code? Does it is it brought up for conversation? Did I miss the vote on that one?
It could, no, that's why we wanted to do this workshop with you guys, as opposed to just bringing it to you and be like, vote, because that's not very productive. And we did that with council, we had kind of that last workshop with them. So, as you get your list finalized, like, schedule a meeting with us, and we'll go through it, and if it's little stuff, we might be able to just tweak it. If
It's all
it's
little
something
stuff,
larger, then we'll kind of look at it, examine that, and then bring that to you as a potential change at the next meeting.
Awesome. And this is changeable over time. So 6 weeks from now, this is approved, or 8 weeks from now, this is approved, and we're all moving forward. This is mutable. We can bring up changes to discuss, vote on, et cetera.
Yep.
That's the beauty about the land development code. This is y'all's code, right? You don't have to go to the state when you want to make changes. If you want to make changes to the comp plan, you go to the state.
We fully expect to have to do with Litchfield within, a year. There's definitely stuff we didn't anticipate or, connections we missed making the code,
So just so we're 100% clear on this, I'm sure many members will come and discuss this with you in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Any recommended change has to happen through the planning commission on the 27th from us.
Yes.
Right.
And so either it's something we discuss as a group and we make that change prior to taking it to council in February, or if we're not able to do it at that point in time, we would kind of make it a recommendation from the planning commission. Hey, they've approved it, but we want to add this or tweak this or what have you. So there's different ways we can do it. Either way, if it's something that we're not going to change ahead of time going to council, we'll make it as like a recommendation. Because they'll review that ordinance twice, so we have time to make any last minute tweaks, changes, corrections, things like that.
Thanks.
Can I ask for maybe an annoying thing? Feel free to say no. But I saw this in a presentation going through, and just to make sure everything is sort of clean, there's a couple of references in your summary that say this was changed, and then there are some that say this was changed from this to this, and it explains the delta. And for those of us who are going to be working our butts off to get through all 300 pages before we have to have a formal opinion on it, is it possible, does there already exist a document that explains the delta? So for example, when you say something like updated, permitted, and conditional uses in each zoning district, it was this, now it is this. Do we have something like that for reference, or do I have to pull up the old one and find it and find a new one?
Yeah, I mean, really, because we're doing a full replacement, the red line version just doesn't exist because it's been done literally over the last 2 years. Incremental changes as we go through the process and all these workshops where we've got new information to change. We can, because some of it's like we updated it to be consistent with building code or statute. We're not going to tell you everything that we changed because it might be hundreds of instances within the entire document where that's changed. So that's why it's kind of a blanket statement, because it's just too much to kind of share that, if that makes sense.
Well, right, and that's
Because it's like
why
a wholesale update of certain things.
that's what I'm asking
Yeah.
is, a complete rewrite. A lot of stuff can be lost in there.
Sure.
And
Yeah, no, I
just-
definitely appreciate that.
Or put in there exactly right, and,
Yeah.
being a labyrinthian, sort of 300-page document, the average citizen certainly isn't going to read it. I would say probably 10% of us, maybe 20.
Nobody's reading it, but literally Christian and I, every day. I mean, we're reading it all day, every day.
And myself, and that's
Yeah.
the thing, there's some tiny things in here that may lead to more administrative burden. I honestly I couldn't even guess how many times it might come up, maybe never, but
Yeah.
there's a little bit of obfuscation here in some places. But then I'm also just putting myself in the shoes of the citizens of
Sure.
Jackson, sort of to what you referenced, Margo, and just how do we make this parsimonious and easy to understand for them?
Right.
Because I don't want them coming, I want them to have the full trust in the city that the changes made are at the level of fidelity that I think a citizen would want in a code change like this. And making line item simple red line changes is like everybody can look at the delta
Yeah,
and see what that
sure.
is. And
Yeah, I
this
totally
is-
get that.
I don't know what to say there.
One of the good things about this, and we all do these massive book things all the time, I do them at work all the time, and I know you guys all do too. 20% or 8% of what the Pareto rule comes into effect. So 20% is what we need, what we work on most of the time out of the whole corpus. Probably less than that in my time on stuff will work out, and I think we should look at whatever we want to talk about, but I'm not gonna get too wrapped around the axle, trying to read every word in here, because I know the sections that we live in. And
Right. And that's why we wanted to point those out. And again, we have been in this document for the last 2 years,
Right.
working out the nitty-gritty details, because that's our job. So that's what we're here to do, is to work that out. So you're right, it is hard to describe every single change that we made, because again, some of them are wholesale, some are the nitty-gritty details, and that's what we really wanted to share with you guys, and that's the little things we've talked to council about over the course of all these workshops. Those kind of bigger things that are going to be very impactful, you know, as opposed to like, well, we just made everything consistent with statute in Florida Building Code. That's pretty self-explanatory. We don't want to burden you with all the little details with that kind of stuff. It's the bigger stuff that we really want to focus on, and like David said, what's going to be pertinent to this group. It's going to be different for city council and different for board of
When the
adjustment.
nitty-gritty comes up, we'll all be here, we'll all be talking about it, and it will be clear to everybody on that particular little bitty, when we leave, this is how we're looking at it. Because I've just seen it done too many times with this group, so.
But there's something about the storytelling, the kind of, as this goes to the public, to kind of tell them the big picture. Like it wasn't immediately obvious to me that we were going in an affordable housing direction. So I think maybe this stepping back on the story, and I don't know how you get that word out, but you know, we're updating because we had a lot of housekeeping to do, and because it's an elderly document and
Right,
all
that
those
was,
things.
honestly,
You know,
it was the
like
piece of
those,
it, yeah.
the public will get that and
Mhm.
not necessarily have a question. But then we're also implementing our comprehensive plan.
Right.
We're going in those directions. So maybe if there's just a way to kind of highlight it,
Okay.
just in the press release.
Yeah, and
You know,
also
whatever.
we're implementing the
That's what the
strategic
comp
plan.
plan
What's that?
That's the purpose of the comp plan. is
Well-
to provide you a general direction that you're free to move in under state guidelines.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And this is implementing our
Let's
comp
put it
plan.
safe that this is in each of
And it's also implementing the council's strategic plan as well.
The public, like, thinks
Yeah,
that,
I don't
knows
think
what our comp plan is,
Yeah, I think-
cares deeply, and whatever.
I think
But
they
I
need to know
think
what
we-
the comp plan is, and it's a constitutional law. It's not.
I just think making the linkage that we do have a vision.
Yeah,
And
well,
if you already have that-
for example, I'll just use this one example. One of the council priorities in the strategic plan was to preserve single-family neighborhoods. And we have come up with every idea we possibly can to do that in a lot of different parts of the code. So preserving historic single-family, allowing ADUs at single-family and multifamily where the density is not impacted, decreasing housing size, minimal, non-conform. So we've done a lot of little things here and there, and some of that is in that one document that I said was blue and yellow, but I think it's green and yellow, for some of these things, because we wanted to make sure that these priorities set forward by council that ultimately originated from the community were addressed where we could address them here. Some aren't for this document or this stage, but we did what we could with the ones that we could. So I think I understand what you're saying as far as making sure we tell the
Yeah, it's
story
just
to
the
the
message.
community on what
Yeah.
we've done, yeah.
We said we'd do it, we're doing it.
Are we talking about nothing that these? No.
And she's gonna be yelling at all of us tomorrow.
So, I'd like to make a suggestion, because I think Dean and I are the closest we have to people that are just citizens of Jack's Beach, right? The rest of us sitting here have a bare minimum of a year looking at this stuff, so there's a lot of stuff we kind of take for granted. On what you've got right here, is it possible just to, I'm sure we still have a copy of the old land development code. If you don't, I got one in my den back at home.
Yes, we do.
But
It's still on Muni Code,
Can you just,
so again.
can we just annotate it with the section that it was in the old land development code for these things?
Yeah, we could. We didn't move too much around. We did move some things
Yeah, but if
around.
you just put an
Yeah,
annotation of the
combine
section that it
things.
was in and just print out a copy of the land development code, you can see what the old land development code said for these things.
I think it'd be helpful.
It'd be helpful to see the reference. I think it would be useful for the average citizen. Again, y'all, this is great. I don't want what I'm saying to
Sure.
minimize.
No, I totally understand, because it is hard to go back and forth. We're doing the same thing, because we're not
Right.
looking at a red line version either. We're going, well, I know it says this, and I've got this open, and I have Unicode open on my computer.
Right.
I mean, that's the only way to do it because the red line is too much. We took whole sections out the door, this whole section moved over here, so
Right,
it's,
so Unicode's a nice way to do it.
Unicode is what's adopted now. So that'll be how, what we're, then this is the proposed new version, that's not adopted. So it is hard to go back and forth because whole sections have changed, numbers, so we can do our best to try to provide that. It might be a little messy, but
Well,
we'll do our
okay,
best.
if it's not feasible to do that, or, you know, a little bit unreasonable, or maybe not gonna be useful, then as part of the storytelling, I do think it's worthwhile to explain to people that this is a rewrite, and it's not a
Yeah.
line item change, and
Yeah.
that's super clear to people.
Yeah, and we have, again, if you look at that first attachment that's
Mhm.
in your packets, it lists all the workshops we have.
Yeah.
And that has
all the way
been the
back.
message
It's
all
been-
along.
It's been stated for
Yep.
each one.
Yeah, that's been the message all along is the
Oh, right.
community said they wanted this, council made the strategic plan, and we're now updating all of our stuff based on all of those workshops, community conversations that were had years ago with the council, the city manager, and the community and business owners, and it literally taken all this information and tried to boil it down into how do we make that implementable? You know, how do we put that in the code so people say they want this, how do we put it in the code so that can happen?
Perfect.
So it's 100 different issues, and that's the complication with waiting so long to do something like this to your code, is that we were making up for it a lot of time, where
Yeah.
instead of keeping up with the times and changing the code as we went along, we're now doing it all at once.
Cool. I mean, that's really
Which is
useful
scary, I'm
context.
not gonna lie, keeps me up at night.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I want this to work, I live here too, I'm a resident just like you guys,
it's
so
gonna work.
I want this to work just as much as you guys in council, because it impacts me too. But, I really encourage you guys, please meet with us if you have questions, even if it's dumb questions, typos, that's what we're here for, so if you don't reach out to us, fuck you, just kidding.
We'll just call you out for meeting.
Yes,
I'll try not to use too much of your time.
no, totally fine, again, that's what we're here for, we're anticipating meeting with everybody, including council, so that's what we would prefer to happen, instead of you guys come to the meeting with more questions, and we can kind of knock that stuff out ahead of time. Any other things you guys have to kind of wrap this up?
Yeah, and is there a planning department report? I assume not, just at our next meeting is the
Please
27th.
come to the meeting on the 27th.
Yeah, we'll send out an
And
email in advance,
schedule
letting
us.
you know where it's gonna be and what time.
Yeah,
We
since
get
it's
kind
not
of
here.
blindsided by the renovations going on here, so we didn't have time to. Where's Park?
South Beach Park down there, where the fire station and the
South Beach
community
Parkway,
center,
not the
skate
old-
park.
Gotcha.
We'll make sure you guys have the address.
We have a meeting in the playground.
You wanna have it in the skate, yeah, we're having the
As
meeting in
long
the
as it's
skate
not
park.
raining and
Make
cold.
sure to reserve a pickleball court.
Yes.
Today it's
On the
pretty bad.
pickleball court, yeah, that's right.
You got a 60-minute block.